More massive protests in the U.S. over the death of George Floyd and more criticism over chaotic scenes near the White House. The fallout over George Floyd's death continues to ripple through many U.S. cities tonight. This despite a threat from the president to send in the military to crack down on violence. And Donald Trump is now facing a backlash for a display of police force near the White House that some feel has made matters even worse. Ellen Morrow with the latest.
Would you shoot me because Donald Trump told you to?
Protesters and police separated by a new fence fortifying the White House. In the same spot yesterday, police used tear gas and rubber bullets, pushing back peaceful crowds for President Trump to have this photo op outside a historic D.C. church, a use of force widely condemned.
This was a charade that in some ways was meant to bolster a message that does nothing to calm the soul and to reassure the nation that we can recover.
Trump ordered troops to the streets of Washington after nights of unrest. U.S. military helicopters buzzing over U.S. citizens in the U.S. Capitol.
Bringing in the active duty military against Americans for any reason is inappropriate.
The president tweeted D.C. had no problems last night, overwhelming force, before thanking himself. In a starkly different tone, his Democratic rival urged action on police reform.
Donald Trump has turned this country into a battlefield riven by old resentments and fresh fears. The moment has come for our nation to deal with systemic racism.
That racism fueling even more protests last night.
This is very important because if we just stop, then they'll think it's okay, but we have to keep fighting for our rights.
Most were peaceful, but some saw violent clashes and looting. At least 9 people have died in the unrest. Today, the demonstrations continue. This crowd in Manhattan marching in the name of George Floyd and the cause of change. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Toronto.
CNN's Nadia Romero is in Minneapolis tonight. The state of Minnesota has filed a civil rights charge against the Minneapolis Police Department. Now, what can you tell us about that and how the news is being received there?
Yeah, Dwight, we also know that the governor of Minnesota says that he will investigate the last 10 years of the Minneapolis Police Department's interactions with people of color. So there is obviously a pattern that has been proven and that will be continued to be investigated here in Minneapolis. When you talk to people who have been protesting, they all say that this didn't start with George Floyd. Just 4 years ago in 2016, another unarmed black man, Philando Castile, was sitting in his car and there was a viral video. His fiance was on Facebook Live as that police officer shot and killed him. So there have been so many cases and instances of this that have happened over the years that now we are seeing charges being filed and investigations beginning against the Minneapolis Police Department. It is only part of what protesters and the George Floyd family want to see. They also want to see all 4 of the police officers who were involved in killing George Floyd to be criminally prosecuted. Only one is facing third-degree murder and a manslaughter charge right now. Dwight?
Yes, a lot of people waiting for those other officers to also face some charges. Now, last night was the second night of mostly peaceful protests in Minneapolis. Is there a sense down there that the appeals for an end to the violence are having an impact?
Absolutely. George Floyd's youngest brother made an impassioned plea last night asking protesters to keep the protests as peaceful as possible and to remember the legacy, the memory of his brother. And take a look behind me. This is one of the most peaceful areas of Minneapolis. This is the growing memorial for where George Floyd was killed. This is where he was arrested, and this is where he died in police custody in that viral video. People have been coming out, taking pictures, leaving drawings and posters, leaving flowers and candles, all in the memory of George Floyd. So this in front of a Cub Foods, and we heard from the owner of Cub Foods today, who said that he will no longer call the police because he does not believe that the Minneapolis Police Department has the right training and the wherewithal to treat people of color with respect and dignity. So he believes that he will no longer call the Minneapolis Police Department, but only handle instances on his own.
CNN's Nadia Romero in Minneapolis for us tonight. Nadia, thank you. Justin Trudeau took a very long pause today before answering a question about events south of the border at his daily news conference. Here is David Cochrane and how the Prime Minister and other party leaders have been reacting.
The Prime Minister had to know the question was coming.
But we do have Donald Trump now calling for military action against protesters.
But it still seemed to catch him off guard.
I'd like to ask you what you think about that. And if you don't want to comment, what message do you think you're sending?
For 21 seconds, Justin Trudeau gathered his thoughts, picking every word carefully.
We all watch in horror and consternation what's going on in the United States. It is a time to pull people together, but it is a time to listen.
Trudeau spoke broadly about racism and injustice, but not directly about the use of tear gas and rubber bullets against protesters to clear a path for a presidential photo op.
Anti-black racism is happening here, everywhere in Canada, every single day.
Instead, Trudeau and other leaders looked inward to acknowledge racial injustice in Canada, to voice frustration.
You know what? People are done with pretty speeches, particularly pretty speeches from people in power that could do something about it right now if they wanted to.
To promise change.
Because I want you to know that our government is listening. We hear your calls for justice, equality, and accountability.
With the U.S. in turmoil, it's no surprise that Trudeau would steer clear of provoking Trump. The Canada-U.S. border is closed, but still subject to delicate negotiations to ensure a steady supply of masks, medicine, and food can come to Canada. David Cochrane, CBC News, Ottawa.
Premier Ford was also asked about the situation in the U.S. today. He says he has personally never tolerated racism, and he added there are vast differences between Canada and the U.S. when it comes to race relations.
Thank God that we're different than the United States, and we don't have the systemic, deep roots they have had for years. When I went down to the U.S., spent 20 years back and forth building the company down there. I said the difference between the U.S. and Canada, for the most part, we get along. We all live beside each other. We work together. We share communities. We go shopping. So, believe me, it's night and day.
A conversation coming out of the protests has been the funding of police. In Toronto, the police make up the biggest chunk of our city's budget. Some are questioning whether that money could be redirected as part of a solution. Lisa Shing is looking into that for us tonight.
Frontlines Toronto has been supporting young people in the Western and Lawrence area for 36 years, from after-school programs to volunteering opportunities. Lately, the conversations between Executive Director Station Federick and those youth have been tough ones.
You know, there's no value for our lives. It's very, very triggering for many who have been, victims of, police brutality.
Now, as memorials grow and protests continue for George Floyd after he was killed in police custody, some are calling for a redistribution of police funding to organizations like Frontlines.
Rather than simply providing after-school services, educational services, extracurricular activities and sports activities for young people in disadvantaged neighborhoods, we instead have a large amount of funding going to gang intervention prevention initiatives, which are doing the very types of things that I mentioned, but with the involvement of the police.
Some experts say police have been tasked with doing too much in recent years.
not only are the police ill-equipped to do many of those things, but when they're spending their time doing so many different things, they're not actually keeping community members safe.
Back in 2011, the then chair of the Toronto Police Services Board wrote a paper essentially advocating for a leaner police force. It was an unpopular opinion at the time that suggested hiring fewer police officers, since that's the bulk of its billion-dollar budget.
Ask yourself, is that armed, highly paid police officer the right resource for that function? Based on that analysis, police boards and municipalities need to come to a determination as to how many armed uniformed police officers they need.
Advocates are echoing these sentiments now in the wake of Floyd's death, including Frederick, who says any extra funding would retain staff and help youth in the community.
The lack of funding really breaks down the core fabric of what we're trying to do in the community by building long-lasting relationships with these young people so that they can grow and be, strong and confident people in society.
Lisa Shink, CBC News, Toronto.
Ontario has extended its state of emergency over COVID-19 until the end of June. This as officials are trying to trace the contacts of hundreds of people who tested positive for the disease, but they weren't reported to health officials. CBC Toronto broke the story last night. Queen's Park reporter Mike Crawley is looking into what went wrong and what's being done to make sure it doesn't happen again.
The hundreds of positive tests that went unreported were conducted by the William Osler Health System, mostly at this drive-through assessment center in Etobicoke. The samples were processed by the lab at Mount Sinai. According to the province, sometimes the labs inform public health of the positive tests, sometimes it's the job of the assessment center.
There were about 700 cases that were not reported to public health due to misunderstanding between the hospital and the lab that conducted the tests. However, that has been rectified to make sure that it won't happen again.
Even as the health minister confirms the accuracy of CBC's reporting about the mix-up, the premier praises the province's testing system.
I want to thank the public health folks and Ontario Health and everyone out there doing the testing. They've really ramped it up. Our testing has gone up. We have a great testing strategy.
Ontario Health is in charge of the province's COVID-19 lab system. It's a new provincial agency created by the Ford government. It says it takes full responsibility for the mix-up and says it is sorry for what happened.
We have fixed the situation and everyone is very clear on their reporting obligations.
What's not clear? How many of the unreported positives are still to be added to the COVID-19 case count? Ontario's average number of new cases daily has moved like a roller coaster this past month. It trended down in early May, up in the middle of the month, then back down again, but in the past few days, it's rising.
To have 700 test results not be reported properly and then not be able to contact trace those raises serious concerns about the province's reopening plan if we can't get this right.
This latest testing controversy shows the flaws in Ontario's health technology, according to this expert.
We're sort of relying on systems that are set up to be susceptible to human error. And so we're getting the result that the systems are designed to produce, which is we're getting mistakes and it sets us back.
Today, 446 new cases reported in the province, the highest number in nearly a month. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
Last week, the province announced it was expanding its COVID-19 testing strategy, and today we see it in action in Scarborough, where the second of 5 pop-up testing centers got underway. Already hundreds of people have come through. Alicia Son has more now from the site.
So if you come into the facility today, you will be registered with us. We'll take your health card and your personal information and your family doctor if you have one, so that you can have an access to your results. You will be seen by a doctor, so triaged by a nurse, seen by a doctor, and then the swab will be completed.
Public Health is hoping to make COVID-19 testing more accessible, even less daunting.
Most people are afraid of it. It's just an uncomfortable procedure, lasts 5 to 10 seconds. People have likened it to jumping into a pool and having the chlorine go up your nose.
whatever it takes to get you here.
We're coming into some of the hardest hit areas where people may be afraid to come into the hospital environment to have the test completed. So we like to come into the community, let them know that we're here with them, and give them a safe area to be tested.
I've been wanting to go to one for a little while, and I didn't know where to go. My wife has got a sore throat and some sniffles for the last few days. I've had a sore throat for about 2 weeks now. We just figured it better to, get tested. If you don't do it, I think you're just being stupid.
These pop-up centers are open 9 to 5. There's free parking. With 8 nurses on duty swabbing, they can process hundreds of people. And they have been since the first one opened in Scarborough on Friday. Pleased with the progress, the Minister of Health, Christine Elliott, dropped by.
It's great to see a lineup here already. I think that people are anxious. They may not be feeling well, or they may just be concerned that they've been exposed to COVID-19. So having places in convenient locations where people can drop by and be tested is exactly what we want.
So what about the progress on getting more of these pop-ups? Mobile testing units on the road to some of the other hotspots, like some areas of Etobicoke and North York? The province didn't provide much more information on that other than...
We're going to be going around to other areas that need our support.
Today, they were in the Woburn neighborhood of Scarborough. On Thursday, the testing center will be in Malvern at Lester B. Pearson Collegiate. Then Friday in Guildwood at Sir Wilfrid Laurier Collegiate. And on Monday, June 8th, they'll pop up again in Eglinton East at the Scarborough Centre for Alternative Studies. A full list of COVID-19 testing centres can be found on the city's website. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Please do not let it happen. This is not right.
Their long-term care home has 0 cases of COVID-19, but they are about to be taken over by an operator that runs 2 of the 5 facilities named in the military's damning report. Coming up, we take you to the Rose of Sharon for more on their calls to the province to put an end to the takeover. And while it was a nice day, Colette, we hear that is now ending.
Yeah, it's one of these kind of situations where we started off with some unsettled weather, right? The clouds and the showers. And now as we go into the evening hours, we may see a return of even, in fact, some active weather with some thunderstorm activity. Something I was saying yesterday when I was giving you the forecast for today was that the more sunshine we got into the afternoon hours, and we had some decent clearing, didn't we? The better the chance of seeing some storms develop. And look at that. You can see the heat if you don't even look at the numbers, just the color contours here when we get into these oranges, all that trying to push towards Lake Ontario, but certainly feeling it in southwestern Ontario, 31 in Windsor. And for us through this area, all around the Golden Horseshoe, but stretching up towards the Bruce Peninsula as well, in a severe thunderstorm watch, okay? So it just means the conditions are ripe for the development. They haven't developed. If they were to, then it becomes a warning, or if it's imminent, it becomes a warning. But I want to show you what's going on right here, because some of this hasn't really developed yet, just starting to bubble up. So we're seeing a few storms around Barrie, nothing too significant yet. But if I take you forward with the forecast model here into 8 to 10 o'clock through that region, it looks like at this point some of it's staying to the east of the city, but still coming through the GTA. So some active weather possible there. And then tomorrow morning, the better chance will be around the Niagara region, stretching along the north shore of Lake Erie, where we could see the return of not only some showers, but some thunderstorm activity there too. For us this evening, then 20 degrees with the risk of those wet conditions, and then some patchy fog overnight. 26 tomorrow with some nice clearing. I'll get into more details about that coming up, Dwight.
We'll check back with you. Thank you, Colette.
You're welcome.
Weather is brought to you by Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. We test, so it runs. Take advantage of special offers now. It's hard to stop a Trane.
A large section of the downtown core was cordoned off this afternoon after this. Toronto Fire says a large tank, possibly an oxygen tank, ruptured near the Elizabeth Street entrance of St. Kitts near College. It's believed the substance that was coming out of the tank was perlite, an insulation material. Dust spread around the area, coating the street in white. The dust perlite produces, what it produces can irritate people's lungs, so roads were shut down. Crews misted the air as a precaution. Toronto Fire says there are no reports of injuries or respiratory problems, adding the situation is now under control.
We were inside having breakfast and we heard all the trucks going by, so I
I mentioned to my daughter here, wow, there must be a pretty big fire somewhere close by. So I went outside to see one of the trucks going by, and it was parked out front. And then I saw all the flames behind it. So we came out to take a look.
Firefighters were called to the 4-alarm blaze at a construction site near Queen and Sumac around 9 this morning. Officials say the fire was contained to one 3-story townhouse. No reports of any injuries. Construction hasn't even started yet on the Ontario Line subway, but some are already saying to expect delays. Cars are set to roll down the tracks in 2027. Today, the government announced it is looking for bids on the first 2 sections of the subway line. Lorena Redekop has more.
It's an $11 billion project set to run from Ontario Place to the Science Centre. Today, the government announced it's dividing up the work into 3 separate phases and started the first step with requests for qualifications.
This is us opening the door and reaching out to the world and companies around the world and saying we're ready to do this.
The timeline had been 2027 to have trains rolling, but the government shifted the blame to another level of government.
The determining factor will ultimately be the federal financial contribution. We've been calling out to the federal government to make their contribution of at minimum 40% for this project. They expressed support for the Ontario Line during the federal election, and we're still waiting.
The NDP expects there will be delays.
Increasingly, we are hearing reports from the private sector and from internal sources telling us that 2027 deadline is very unrealistic.
The government says it will bring tens of thousands of jobs with this subway line. This U of T professor doesn't think 2027 is realistic to open. He says more important is not having delays later on, once construction is well underway.
Because that's when there's real frustration. The frustration now is people waiting for transit. The frustration when shovels are in the ground and you have delays is traffic being blocked and people's lives being disrupted.
Given the tougher financial picture for the government due to the pandemic and changing habits for transit users, he wonders whether the Scarborough subway and Eglinton Crosstown West extension are viable.
Those are the types of projects where we really need to revisit whether it makes sense to be spending that much money to put them underground.
The government says it is still planning to move ahead with them. Lorena Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
The Eglinton Crosstown has hit a milestone with Avenue Station completing its mining work. It marks the completion of all mining for the project. Construction for the LRT began in 2011, and after many delays, the project is set to be complete in 2022. If you've been on social media today, you'll notice post after post after post of black squares. It's one part of what's being called Blackout Tuesday. After the break, how the music industry is stepping up to show support for protesters. Yelena Adzik joins us with the details next. Today is Blackout Tuesday, the day the music industry is showing its support for people protesting the death of George Floyd. Many artists, executives, and programs are taking part in a social media campaign and are disrupting their workday. Yelena Adzik joins us with more on this now. So, Yelena, let's talk about Blackout Tuesday.
Yeah, so Dwight, this was an interesting way that the day progressed because originally people were supposed to post a black square with the hashtag "the show must be paused." I'm going to give you a look at NBA star Steph Curry's Instagram as well as Rihanna so you can see what I'm talking about. Millions of people did this, they posted. And so, unfortunately, one inadvertent result of this is that a lot of people posted and included the hashtag Black Lives Matter or BLM. And so that became a problem because the original intent of this was to, as you say, disrupt the work week. It was for, a sign of protest against the deaths of Black people in police custody, but also to give people an opportunity to spend their time on something else, learn about Black history, do some research, donate some funds, or get involved with various organizations. But as you can see here from various tweets, this is one especially that stood out. A lot of people were saying this as well. From Anthony Lawrence Williams, he said, please stop doing this. Whenever you include that hashtag of Black Lives Matter, then people who are actually needing to see information about protesting can't see it. They just see black squares. So a bit of a wrinkle there. It does seem, as I look at the various feed, that it is getting a bit fixed. People are deleting those and retweeting or Instagramming rather a post with just a black square and the proper hashtag, which I say is "the show must be paused." So really and truly, Dwight, here, people are just hoping that this is more than just a one-day kind of event.
So what about like other music industry insiders? What are they saying today about the effectiveness now of this Blackout Tuesday initiative?
Yeah, I mean, they were definitely hopeful for people to try any kind of creative way to get the word out there. But obviously, there's some cautious optimism and sometimes skepticism too. I'm going to give you a listen right now to Bianca Gracie. She is an independent music journalist. And here's what she had to say.
If you look at their executives, they're predominantly white. So it's kind of a mismatch of information. You're trying to support Blackout Tuesday, but yet you're not supporting it within your own company. So I think they have to definitely look within themselves to make sure they're doing the right thing, and also not put out messages of reflection. Reflection is not going to change anything. You actually have to either, put your money where your mouth is, because, streaming is making you a lot of money, or, help educate yourself on what's happening.
Now, her point is really underscored by the fact that a lot of other industries outside of music also picked up on this. There were museums, various arts institutions were using this. You think about major media like Viacom, CBS, the station CBS News, MTV, and Comedy Central. They all transmitted 8 minutes and 45 seconds of breathing sounds with a black screen, including the words, "I can't breathe." Of course, this is all to reflect the experience that George Floyd went through when he was pinned down by police and killed. So this is something that, again, a lot of people are saying, this is good. This is very, very helpful to keep reminding people of the importance of the weight and the gravity of the situation. But unless it's really met with more action and perhaps dollars to contribute to the cause, then it would be an empty gesture. So, Dwight, overall, as you know how this goes, there's this hope that this is just not a one-day kind of thing, but rather just part of that larger initiative towards justice and equality.
Thank you, Yelena.
See you soon.
The Korean community in Toronto is worried about its beloved long-term care home. It's set to be taken over by another company that's recently been in the spotlight during the pandemic for all the wrong reasons.
It may be an experienced seniors housing operator, but that experience, in fact, is deplorable.
I'm Angelina King outside the Rose of Sharon long-term care home. I'll have more on their concerns and what the government is saying. That's coming up.
The Korean Canadian community in the GTA is trying to save its one and only long-term care home. Rose of Sharon is being taken over by a company with what's being described by one doctor as a deplorable COVID-19 record. Rika Care Centers has been the subject of lawsuits, and including in the scathing Canadian military report on nursing homes. As Angelina King tells us, the sale is conditional on one thing.
Please do not let it happen. This is not right.
82-year-old Hae Ki-min is begging the province to reject Rika Care Center's application to take over Rose of Sharon. Her husband has been a resident for 4 years after being on the wait list for more than 3.
Since then, my husband is so settled. He likes here, and then I am so happy.
No transport! No transport!
The concern shared by the larger Korean Canadian community. Some of Rika's homes are among the hardest hit by COVID-19 in Ontario. The Canadian military had been called into Eatonville, where they reported seeing COVID-19 positive residents allowed to wander, putting others at risk of exposure, and Hawthorne Place, where they say residents were not being fed for hours or bathed for several weeks. In Rika's 3 hardest hit homes, there is a total of 115 COVID-19 cases. Rose of Sharon has 0.
It may be an experienced seniors housing operator, but that experience, in fact, is deplorable.
Rika says it's ensuring homes have the resources and tools to provide a comfortable and enriching environment. It says most of their homes have been successful at keeping COVID-19 at bay. Rose of Sharon is the only Korean long-term care home in Ontario. Here, staff speak the language, serve traditional food, and organize cultural activities. There's concern that will be lost if Rika takes over.
It is not qualified to provide culturally sensitive care, as it already permits abusive and inappropriate behavior in non-culturally specific homes.
Rika says it looks forward to carrying on the traditions while providing excellent care to the Korean community. The sale is conditional on the province approving the license transfer, which is still being reviewed. The topic coming up today in question period.
We will make sure that it is a thoughtful process and adheres to what is required for this home and for the residents.
When the home was for sale in 2017, the Korean community raised $3.5 million in just 3 months to put in a bid. But Rika won. They hope this can be a second chance.
It is our hope of creating a new future on solid footing, led by members raised and
Exactly when the sale could go through isn't public information, but the province must first hold public consultations, and that process hasn't started yet. Angelina King, CBC News, Toronto.
A very different looking convocation day for U of T students. You can see it was, for the most part, a virtual graduation. No students on hand, of course, because of the pandemic. The university is planning to hold in-person celebrations at a later date. Now, one of the students graduating today from the Faculty of Medicine is also going down in the history books.
One of my personal heroes is a former First Lady of the United States, Michelle Obama. In her memoir, she wrote, "If you don't get out there and define yourself, you'll be quickly and inaccurately defined by others." And so, as we pause to reflect on the past 4 years and ponder on the next, perhaps we should ask, how have we defined ourselves, and how will we continue to do so as physicians in this world?
We had her on the show yesterday when Chika Stacy Oriyu started medical school at the University of Toronto 4 years ago. She was the only black person in the class of 259 students. Today, she graduated as valedictorian, becoming just the second black woman valedictorian and the first woman in 14 years to receive the honor. The city has located 2 sites for its modular housing initiative, a proposed plan aimed to create 250 homes to help fight homelessness.
City staff and the staff at Create TO have been very busy evaluating city-owned sites across Toronto, looking at a variety of factors, including local demand for affordable housing, development potential of the different sites, local infrastructure such as sewers and roads, because the modular housing itself can be, after it's installed, can be hooked up immediately to those services if they're available, access to public transit, access to health and other community services, and zoning and other planning considerations.
The first site will have 44 bachelor apartments and is located at the former 14 Division Police Station near Dundas and Dovercourt. The second will have 56 bachelor apartments and will be located near Victoria Park and Danforth. Each unit will have a kitchen and a washroom, as well as a shared communal kitchen and a space for programs. The city says it's on track to bring affordable and quality housing to 100 people by fall 2020, with more housing to come. Many of Canada's top Olympic and Paralympic athletes will slowly start getting back into the gym in the coming weeks. This after the province set out guidelines last month for high-performance sports facilities to start reopening. As Greg Ross tells us, the first in the country to invite athletes back was the Canadian Sports Institute right here in Scarborough.
They're back, sort of.
With that, I'm excited to say that we have a number of our Olympic athletes on today.
The Minister of Tourism, Culture and Sport, Lisa MacLeod, taking part in this Zoom call this morning, letting some of Canada's Olympians and Paralympians know they once again have a place to train.
We're pleased today in the province of Ontario to be the first jurisdiction in our country and one of the few jurisdictions in North America to welcome back our high-performance athletes as they prepare for the road to Tokyo next year.
Starting today, athletes can book 1-hour strength and conditioning sessions with the Canadian Institute of Sport Ontario, which operates out of the Toronto Pan Am Centre. Great news for wheelchair basketball player Nikola Gonchin, who admits he has a lot of lost time to make up for.
Man, it's been almost 3 months since I've lifted a weight that's heavier than 40 pounds. So
I cannot wait to get back to training in a world-class environment.
But it's not exactly going to be business as usual.
Following all the various protocols here in the gym.
And that may take a little getting used to.
We have developed protocols and strict safety and hygiene standards using the Return to Sport Risk Assessment and Mitigation Tool Checklist.
New guidelines include athletes must stay at least 2 meters apart. Only 6 athletes will be allowed in the facility at one time, and they will only have access to the strength and conditioning area. Locker rooms, change rooms, and shower areas will remain closed.
Training will be a lot smaller than normal, but that's to be expected.
The goal is for them to be able to get back in shape while at the same time staying safe.
We are confident that the modifications that we have made to our training center will allow our high-performance athletes in Ontario to return to train in the safest possible way.
At least 6 more training facilities are expected to open up across the country in the coming weeks, including Milton's Pan Am Velodrome. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
With home runs on pause, the Rogers Centre is set to play home base to an initiative run by Food Banks Canada. 6,000 pallets of food will be stored there to later be sorted and shipped to families in need right across our country. Take a look at the project called Step Up to the Plate.
Well, we're here at the Rogers Centre, and we're kicking off a great campaign to pack 390,000 food boxes to be distributed across Canada to the various food banks across Canada. So each food box, a food hamper, has enough food for an adult for 7 days, and it's got great high-quality, high-protein food in it. So we've got rice, we've got peanut butter, canned tuna fish, pasta, canned beans, we've got canned fruit, canned vegetables, granola bars. So good high-quality food. This is the kind of food that food banks depend on and look for to give out to their clients across Canada. So great quality food going out in these food boxes.
Well, for 36 years, the Blue Jays have supported Food Banks Canada, and this year, without baseball yet in the stadium, we decided to up our support of Food Banks Canada. We went out, we raised with our partners and our fans $1.5 million meals for Food Banks Canada, and we wanted to do more.
This pandemic has rendered a lot of people powerless, and this actually gives them their power back by stepping up, by helping others, and by seeing how they can impact. We are all in this together. To the extent that my neighbor is having a problem, I'm having a problem. To the extent that somebody has lost their job, it will impact everybody around them. And I think at that point in time, you have to step back and figure out, okay, well, how can you help that neighbor? What are the things that you can do? Whether it's your time, whether it's donating to a variety of causes, there's a myriad of ways that you can step up. And to the extent that you turn a blind eye on the problems facing you, it won't help you as an individual and it won't help you as a corporation.
great use of the space since there is no baseball. And I think, Colin, around this time last year, we were at a Jays game and you were making fun of me for eating a hot dog that was about this. But you're like, Dwight, you actually finished it? And yes, I did.
Yes, and I took pictures. I have the evidence still, Dwight, of that. It was so funny because, like, I think it was yesterday, I was saying, I would really like to have a hot dog one of these days. We've been eating so well during this time. It's like, I just like a hot dog. I miss baseball, too. All right, let's go ahead and show you what's going on here with our weather conditions. We do have a stormy evening that's coming up here. Not everyone is going to see some of the activity, but it's starting to bubble up on the radar. I was talking about it earlier, and I'll show you where things lie right now. Some patchy fog once the storms roll through, and then Wednesday we'll get into some clearing after a few showers in the morning, but some clearing into the afternoon, and a beautiful day really will be on tap, especially the latter part of the day. I want to show you these highs again. 31 for Windsor, but Kingston 14, a 17-degree temperature difference today because southwesterly winds coming in off the lake there for Kingston kept things cool. They only warmed up 3 degrees from this morning. And then here we are kind of in the middle with those mid-20s and very comfortable conditions. Well, some of that daytime heating, though, lending energy to storms that are trying to develop here. So the watch means conditions are favorable for severe storms to develop, in which case we could get some pretty strong wind gusts in here, some small hail, that potential, and locally some very heavy downpours. So these are some of those cells. Earlier in the show, there was hardly anything there, and now they're kind of bubbling up. They are tracking a bit to the east of the city, but more may pop up here. And as they do, that's where I see maybe into these evening hours that it could slide a little bit further west and come in towards the city. But some activity there for sure, and always lightning you have to be concerned about. In towards tomorrow morning, most of the showery activity and any thunderstorms should be more towards the Niagara region, but I put at least some light showers into our area. And then I'm saying clearing out after that, and Thursday looking phenomenal with lots of sunshine. So patchy fog possible tonight, mid-teens for our lows. Tomorrow we're going back to the mid-20s, and if anything, a degree or two warmer once we get into that sunshine in the afternoon. So running well above seasonal there. And then Thursday, even more above seasonal, 28 degrees with sunshine. Most of Friday, by the way, Dwight, is looking good. It's only late day, it seems, well, where we will get into a few showers.
Looking good. Look at that sunshine. Thank you,
Yeah,
Colin.
hot dogs in order for the weekend barbecue.
Yes, ma'am.
We don't want to see disease spread, but at the same time, I certainly empathize with the folks that feel the urge to stand up and to speak.
The two biggest stories right now are coming to a head. Could protests like these lead to new outbreaks of COVID-19? Public health experts fear they could. After the break, how the coronavirus has already impacted people of color. The unrest over George Floyd's death continues to roil across many U.S. cities, even as Donald Trump threatens to send the military to crack down on violent protests. A massive crowd gathered today to march against police brutality and racism through the streets of New York. Los Angeles also saw largely peaceful demonstrations, but the past 7 days have also been marked by violence, including reports of excessive use of force by riot police. 20,000 National Guard soldiers have already been deployed across nearly 30 states to assist local officers. At least 9 deaths and more than 5,000 arrests have been linked to these protests. Public health experts fear the ongoing protests will lead to new outbreaks of COVID-19. As Christine Birak explains, the coronavirus has already disproportionately affected people of color.
Large gatherings of people screaming to be heard. Some are being met with violence, pepper spray, tear gas. Many are coughing and gasping for air, fueling a pandemic that's claiming lives every day.
Irrespective of which pandemic you're interested in, people in poverty, people of African American descent here in the U.S. Are the people that are going to be hit either way.
Researchers found in Chicago alone, Black Americans make up about 30% of the population, but they account for nearly 70% of COVID-19 deaths in that city.
How are you feeling today?
Doctors say in some Canadian provinces, the numbers are similar.
We know in Ontario that nearly 70% of COVID cases have happened in our most ethnically dense and racialized communities.
Many doctors insist long before COVID-19 came along, racial discrimination has been a major obstacle for communities of color. It affects how children are treated in school, their success later in the job market, right through to receiving health care.
We also know that diagnoses like cancer can often happen later, for example, in skin cancer in Black people, because of the way the medical system teaches clinicians how to pick up cancers like that.
ER Dr. Taslim Nimji says protests may bring a wave of COVID-19 patients into her hospital.
We don't want to see disease spread, but at the same time, I certainly empathize with the folks that feel the urge to stand up and to speak.
Health experts say the actions of police, including the use of tear gas and pepper spray, should also be scrutinized.
Some of their potentially usual policing tactics and safety tactics may actually be inappropriate in a time when there is a pandemic of a respiratory virus that is spread by people coughing.
People who are citizens that governments are obligated to protect. Christine Birak, CBC News, Toronto.
After the break, today's Frontline Hero. We'll be right back. Amanda Bradley directly supports people living with intellectual and developmental disabilities at Community Living Ajax, Pickering, and Whitby. Besides providing in-home assistance, Bradley's also inspiring residents through song. Her friend says her musical theater friend colleague Diana tells us each week Bradley posts a video on the organization's Facebook page as a way to bring joy to residents and staff. Take a look.
Lean on me when you're not strong. I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. For it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on.
Bradley has also worked with a local theater company and toured Ontario with those pipes. Her colleague says she's got an amazing personality to go along with her voice, helping to take care of some of the most vulnerable people in our community. So tonight, thank you, Amanda Bradley, and your pipes. A fascinating new visitor to Montreal has been making quite a splash around the city. For a few days now, actually. This wayward humpback whale was first spotted near Montreal's Old Port on Saturday, and it's been hanging around ever since. Marine experts say they've never seen a whale of this size so far south on the St. Lawrence, and that it may be disoriented, but so far it has not been showing any signs of distress. I have been in that area, and it would be so cool to just look over in the water and see a whale hanging out.
It's not where you think of whale watching, but it is amazing. I do obviously hope it's going to be okay as well. It looks like it's having a good time for now. The severe thunderstorm watch, just to relay that back to you, that is in place. It does include the city of Toronto. Hamilton's in here. You can see it goes around the Niagara region up towards the Bruce Peninsula and all these points in between, although a lot of the development we've been seeing so far has been over here kind of more towards the east of Barrie, but we're seeing more of these storms kind of bubbling up this evening, so that's what you have to be kind of cautious of between about now and 11 o'clock. Be watching these things carefully for you. Evening 20 degrees as our temperature comes down, still sitting there in the low 20s. Overnight, once these storms roll through, and again, not everyone's even going to see any activity from this, but once they do, a few areas will likely have a little bit of patchy fog. The overnight low around 15 degrees, so mid-teens, running above seasonal. Our daytime highs are running above seasonal as well by about 5 degrees, just about there. As tomorrow, we're going up to 26 degrees. What's really important through here is that in the morning we'll likely have some cloud cover and some scattered showers. Heavier stuff around the Niagara region, that potential there, but in the city it'll be in the morning and then clearing into the afternoon, becoming a very nice day, Dwight.
And you know how much we like very nice days, Colette, so thank
Love
you. We'll
You're
see you
welcome.
later. That is our show for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Mike Wise has your next local news tonight at 11 right after the National. We will see you back here tomorrow at 6. Stay safe and have a great night, everybody.